find such a love at our age. Whoever thought we could dance?
Welcome to Couples Therapy in 7 Words. I'm your co-host, Judy Alexander, and I'm here with my husband, Dr. Bruce Chalmer.
Hello, Judy. Hello, viewers and listeners. And Judy, tell folks, what is today's title?
Betrayal Trauma. How can you heal and move on?
Yes, indeed. Always a timely topic, unfortunately.
Unfortunately, it is.
But I'll talk more about why I particularly wanted to do that topic now in the course of our podcast. But before we do that, let's put in a word for a few things. First of all, I've been mentioning now for a few weeks, our podcast website has been completely redesigned. Gee, Judy, tell folks the podcast website.
CT, as in couples therapy, in 7, the number 7, ctin7.com.
Yes. And you know, it's interesting. I will also let on that if you actually spelled out in all words, couplestherapyin7words.com, you would get it too. That CTin7 thing is an alias that I created a couple of years ago because that other thing would be a lot to type.
That's right.
But when you do that, don't be surprised that it changes into couplestherapyin7words.com. It writes it all out because that's the original.
Would say that to you too as you're typing. All right.
Couples Therapy in 7 Words. Anyway, that's us, right?
That's
Couples
us.
Therapy in 7 Words. And we'll have occasion, I'm sure, to mention what the 7 words are somewhere. Well, we do at the very end of our, if you want to hear the 7 words at the very end of our podcast, we always recite them. So there you are. There's send them to actually listen to the very end. I'm not sure how many people actually have ever heard the very end. Wow. We have lots of listeners. I just don't know how many of you actually go all the way to the very end of the podcast. Yeah. So there we are. So mention that. And I also want to put in a plug for my practice website, my own website, brucechalmer.com. If you spell my name right, you'll have it, brucechalmer.com. And that's where I have information about my practice, which you can still work with me, by the way. I do telehealth sessions for couples. And I also have information there about my books, and there's a link to this podcast. And the thing I'm really excited about these days, the video courses. Plural, I can now say.
Courses.
The video courses that I have released. I now have 2 of them out there, and I'm working on a 3rd.
Yeah.
And the 2 that I have out there, the first one is called The Passion Paradox. And the one that I've just released is called Betrayal and Forgiveness.
Ah, well, how timely.
Funny thing that suddenly I have this really strong desire to talk about betrayal trauma. And I'll, so should we get on with it?
Let's
go on with that. Yes.
Delve right in.
So that term betrayal trauma, it's interesting. I don't recall that I even use it in the book I wrote called Betrayal and Forgiveness, but it's a very, very common term. And I've noted in the advertising I've been doing for my courses now, it's a term often searched for as well. And there's a reason for that. The term, but trauma itself in a psychological, actually, let me bounce that to you. Like, what is your understanding in a psychological context when we say trauma? What are we talking about? It's a little different from a medical context.
Well, something that happened in your past that was so devastating that it causes some type of possibly even a physical reaction in you, whether it's anxiety or it's like it's happening to you all over again.
That's the key. The last part you said is the key. Right. Clearly, the word trauma always means something bad happened to you. Right. In the medical context, if you have blunt trauma, that means you got hit by something blunt and it injured you. That's what trauma means. But in a psychological context, especially if we say unprocessed trauma, that's the kind of buzz term, that it means exactly what you were saying. It's not merely that something bad happened and it caused you, physical and or, psychological pain. Of course, lots of things do that. It's that if it's unprocessed trauma, it means it's still doing that even when it's not actually happening. So that reminders of it cause a reaction as if it were actually happening. Now, the extreme cases of that are flashbacks. If somebody has a flashback, they think they're actually being attacked or whatever that might be, and they respond as if they were, and it can seem to an observer, it can seem crazy. What I've always found interesting about trauma responses is they're not crazy.
Yeah.
And it's not like I never use the term crazy because, if somebody's having a psychotic break,
Right.
like they're having a schizophrenic psychotic episode, or they're having a bipolar manic episode or something like that, and they are perceiving, oh my God, the FBI is controlling the signals in my brain or whatever that is kind of my definition of crazy. That's like, okay, that's an illness. There's something malfunctioning.
Right.
But the fascinating thing about a trauma response, and of course PTSD, I'll mention in this context, post-traumatic stress disorder, it's when those responses happen when it's not actually happening. And you could say that's crazy, except that it's a function of a well-functioning brain that says, if you get reminded of something that almost killed you, you better panic. You better respond. You better not be, sitting around thinking and contemplating. You better click into fight or flight or freeze mode or something like that, because it's about survival.
Yeah.
So the fact that you could argue from the outside, you could say, but it isn't actually happening now, so that's not very functional, is it? Well, yeah, it isn't very functional in the moment, but the tendency to overreact is what has saved us as a species. Nature errs on the side of overreaction, not underreaction, when it comes to trauma. Because, if you didn't really need to run away from that thing you thought was a saber-toothed tiger, it didn't cost you anything except maybe some distress. But if you fail to run away from it and it is a saber-toothed tiger, it's going to kill you.
Yeah.
So those of our ancestors who didn't panic enough didn't become our ancestors. That's one of my favorite things to point out, right? I did not make up that observation, by the way. We are the descendants of people who panic too much, not too little. The ones who panic too little didn't become our ancestors on the average. That in evolutionary terms, you're talking about long-term averages.
Right.
And so a little bit of evolutionary benefit, survival benefit, over a long time starts to show up more in the population. So we are prone to panic. That's who we are. Everybody has to be able to do that. So trauma is, I've always loved to point this out. I mean, when I'm working, I used to do a lot of work with folks with PTSD, actually, as part of my career. And I would always like to point out, PTSD is not the result of a damaged brain. It's the result of a brain doing what it's supposed to do. Now, to heal it, fortunately, there are ways to heal it. And so again, what do you know about that? What's your...
About healing from trauma?
Yeah, what's the basic, how do you do that? Just, you don't have to use technical terminology to understand it. Like what helps you heal from, what helps you know that something isn't dangerous? Let's put it that way.
What helps you know that something isn't
like
dangerous?
a memory,
Well, when it's just a memory and it doesn't feel like it's happening all over again.
Well, that is, that's the end point I'm asking. So I'm saying, well, what helps you get to that end point?
I don't know.
Yeah. Well, so I will note everybody's been hurt in their lives. Right? You don't have to be that old to have been hurt one way or another. Everybody's been hurt. How do you get past that? How do you get over it? If you think about it.
Well, I guess there are different ways to process it.
Sure.
One is to talk about the person. Let's say if it was a person in your life that caused that trauma, maybe have a conversation with them. If you cannot have the conversation...
Let me stop. May I stop you there? That's a great idea. What is it about that conversation that would tend to have the effect of making things better? Again, I'm being pretty simplistic here.
Because that person's point of view might be different from your point of view, and they might have a whole different take on what it was that you're dealing with. I'm being even more simplistic than that. What would help that conversation help you get over your trauma is if it was safe. In other words, I had this conversation with this person and they didn't eat me. And I say eat me because the physiology of fear, it's evolution tends to be fairly efficient. It's like it's the same mechanism of fear. Like if you say something slightly nasty to me, like if you're mad at me and I'm saying, oh no, I'm afraid because I wouldn't want to lose you because I love you and I wouldn't want to lose you. If you're mad at me and I get afraid, my fear mechanism is the same fear as if somebody was about to attack me. It's not the same degree, and I do have a neocortex to help me process that, but it's based on the same stuff. The feelings are very similar. So what helps you get past that is if I have a conversation with you and say, oh, look, you're not mad at me. It's safe after all. Okay, then I don't have to be afraid of you anymore. Well, that's if you can have a conversation with that person.
Of course. But the point I want to make, the point I want to underline, the general mechanism for healing from trauma is you revisit mentally the thing that's been freaking you out in a context that's safe enough that your brain learns, aha, these memories aren't themselves dangerous, even if what we're remembering was. That's the distinction. Then it doesn't feel like it's already happened.
Say that again?
Yeah, that's a crucial distinction.
Say that again?
What you've healed when you can remember what happened, which is to say, be reminded of it. You know, because a lot of these reminders might not even be conscious. You know, you can be reminded of what happened, and your brain now knows the memory of the event, the experience of the memory is a safe thing. The experience of the event was not,
Right.
but the experience of the memory can be. That's the distinction your brain needs to learn. At first, it doesn't know that.
Yeah.
Because when you go through a traumatic event, it's kind of what makes it a traumatic event. A lot of what happens is your memory system is messed up. You don't have, a lot of times people will not have a conscious memory of the worst, the worst thing that happened.
Right.
But they will, if they're reminded of it, their brain will go into panic. So what has to happen is your brain has to be able to go to that memory without it being itself a traumatic event. And then over time you learn. So just a few reps, as they would say in the workout world, I suppose, a few repetitions of being able to visit some place and have it be safe. Your brain says, oh, I guess this is a safe place. And by place, I mean a memory. It's like if you go mentally to the place of that memory and have it be okay, I guess that's all right. Now, if you think about it, what does a good session of therapy try to do?
Help you process that very thing,
Yeah,
yes?
it helps you feel safe. It's like, okay, I'm with somebody who's not going to attack me, who doesn't think ill of me, you hope. That's what you want from your therapist.
Right.
And we're visiting this thing that has been freaking me out, but I'm noticing that in visiting it with this caring and thoughtful person, he or she, the therapist, isn't freaking out.
Right.
And so maybe I don't have to either. And when you experience that enough, it gets better. Now, interesting thing, for those of us trained in treating folks, with PTSD, just talking about it tends not to be that effective, precisely because what we learn to do when we've been traumatized is we learn to talk around it. In other words, we can talk about it, but we've shut off our emotions. So we're not really remembering what we need to remember. I've had numbers of experiences this over the years. I remember one person in particular comes to mind. She was a woman who had been horribly, as if I have to say horribly with the word raped. It's always horrible, but there are degrees, and this was particularly bad, when she was in high school.
Wow.
And when I was working with her, she was in her 40s, I think. This is many years ago. And she was working as a rape counselor.
Wow.
You'd think, she must have processed it, right?
Yeah.
No, it turned out she was having these episodes that almost seemed like psychotic breaks, but weren't. She was having episodes of flashbacks.
Wow.
And not while she was working as a rape counselor, because she had learned to just more or less shut off the emotional part of it. When she could talk about it, but not really talk about it. When she would be reminded of something that was the part she was blocking out, she would freak.
Wow.
And so what helped her was a technique I was trained in called EMDR, which I've mentioned before in my books, and this, I think I've mentioned it in this podcast. Eye movement desensitization and reprocessing is the look it up, EMDR. And the interesting thing is when I would do it, I learned how to do it not even using the eye movements. I would actually use sound to do it, but there's different ways of doing it. But the interesting thing about EMDR is, at least as when I was doing it, and I think there are theories as to why it works now, but I don't think that they're absolutely definitive. I could be wrong about that. Go ahead and correct me on that, those of you who are EMDR mavens. But it works really quite well because what it does is it interrupts the panic cycle, so that you can actually be invited to think about it. You don't even have to talk about it in EMDR, but think about it at the same time you're feeling safe enough because your body isn't doing panic. So your brain then learns, okay, it's possible for these impulses to come, for these neuron networks to fire and still be safe, so they don't have to freak.
Yeah.
So that's basically how you heal. So all of that's all about trauma. So what is it about betrayal trauma that it gets its own category? That people are searching not merely for how do I get over trauma, but how do I get over betrayal trauma?
Is there a way to classify what betrayal trauma is, or is it just so vast that it's hard to know? Because, like we were talking a minute ago about rape, is that what's betrayal trauma, or is it just trauma?
Yeah, well, that of course fits in the general category of trauma. But what makes betrayal trauma? Here's a brilliant statement. This would be on Jeopardy into the category of what, stupid clues or whatever. Remember,
Right.
they sometimes have that category.
Yes.
You know, what is it about betrayal trauma that makes it betrayal trauma rather than just trauma? It's betrayal. Brilliant observation. Yeah, yeah. So, which of course, to answer your question seriously, it's the betrayal part. Of course, what is it that makes something betrayal, and why does that matter? Do you know what I mean? Why does that set it? What makes that worthy of its own category, really? And I'll tell you why. Well,
Okay.
and look, there's a lot of overlap. I mean, again, using the example of rape, for example, certainly a lot of what happens to people when they've gone through that is very similar to being betrayed, in a relationship. Sometimes, first of all, it is being betrayed in a relationship. If the person who raped you is somebody you have a relationship with, which is usually the case, actually, then that is a betrayal.
Yeah.
I would count that as a betrayal. When I have written about and put in my video course, hint hint, little plug for video course, when I talk about what I mean by betrayal, what I'm talking about is it's some bad thing, of course. It's a horrible failure of some kind. And the failure is for a hurtful thing that someone did that is something you would not have expected based on your relationship with them. It's a failure of the relationship. It's not just being hurt. It's like, it's not merely being hurt, which is bad enough. And I say in horrible ways, like rape, there's horrible ways people can get hurt. But it's not merely that. It's being hurt by someone with whom you had a relationship where that shouldn't have been included. So the problem is, if we're talking about an important relationship, the problem there is it's not merely that you have to say, oh my God, I'm horribly hurt, and oh my God, now I'm worried about the state of the world. That's what happens often with rape victims or victims of horrible accidents or things like that. But it's also that I have to doubt my own judgment. I have to doubt, who is this person I have given my heart and soul to, and they've hurt me this way. And I never could have imagined them doing that.
Yeah.
Now what? It completely shakes your world. Like, lots of traumas shake your world, but this is a particular way, because it's like, not only shakes your world in terms of, oh my God, now I don't feel safe. That's bad enough. It shakes your world in terms of, I don't know what to do about my living arrangement. I don't know what to do about the life I'm living with this person. So betrayal as a particular, multifaceted set of reactions that are really hard to deal with. And indeed, you were asking, like, in effect, like, what's special about betrayal trauma? One of the things that makes it so crucial, well, let me turn that sentence around. Because it is so crucial, then it's worth, when you've experienced something that you think is betrayal, it's worth looking at it first to say, do you really have to consider this betrayal? And it's not just a cognitive, intellectual question. It's an emotional question. Because if you can see it differently, you might be able to say, oh, all right, this wasn't betrayal. I don't have to doubt who you were. You just did something I really don't like. Maybe you did something I really don't like I wish you didn't do. A classic example of that is pornography. That often comes up. Somebody will, almost always gendered, not always, but almost always gendered, where woman catches man viewing pornography or masturbating to pornography or whatever, and there's numbers of reactions she might have, among which are, she may feel it's cheating.
Right.
She'll feel like, well, wait a minute, you're having sexual thoughts about somebody besides me. Of course, just that, having sexual thoughts about somebody besides her, if she defines that as cheating, she's in trouble. Because that's, I don't know how people cannot have thoughts. If they're all sexually oriented and they see somebody that they deem sexy, they're going to feel a little bit of arousal about that.
Well, even Jimmy Carter lusted in his heart, as
there
we
you
know.
go. As we know, that's right. Well, of course, he said that was cheating, right? They said that was sinning. I would say, I better not define sin that narrowly. Yes, we're all sinners, but I wouldn't define it that narrowly. But pornography is an interesting one because it has the element where people might think it's cheating,
Yeah.
But it also has the element where people might say, well, no, I don't think it's cheating, but it's really distasteful. I think it's exploitive, or it's, we don't have to get into all the arguments around that, which are all out there, and you can check them out. It's fascinating to me that feminist thinkers and scholars and, activists are not at all united on the question of pornography.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just fascinating. Or on the question of, sort of sexuality in general as sort of a means of exercising somebody's power, like that, whatever. I'm not going to get into that. But the idea, do you have to consider it betrayal? Because if not, you could say, okay, I don't have to completely, maybe I was a little bit unrealistic, or a better example, even a simpler example than pornography. Somebody says, yeah, I'm definitely going to do the laundry before I leave today, and then fails to do the laundry.
Mm-hmm.
So is that a betrayal? I have actually met people who would say, yes, it's a betrayal because he does it all the time and he doesn't care about me. He'll tell me he's going to do something and he doesn't do it. And so, and again, I don't mean to, I don't want to, trivialize anybody's experience. I do note, if you call that betrayal, you're going to have a hard time finding somebody who doesn't betray you.
Well, yes, and you're also going to have a hard time finding anybody being sympathetic with you on that one.
Well, right, except for the people who feel similarly. So. I've met them.
No,
what can
I'm
I tell
talking
you?
about people who cheat on you, people who tell your secret to somebody when, you have them in your confidence.
Yes.
To me, that's a betrayal.
That's a betrayal, yes. Yeah, so the point being, in terms of this distinction, what makes it betrayal trauma, there are sometimes, I have met folks, that's why I talk about this. I have met people who come in feeling like I was betrayed, but when we're able to talk about it calmly, they'll say, I guess I wasn't really betrayed, I was just annoyed. And I don't mean to trivialize it. I was just really badly annoyed, or I was bothered. I wish you hadn't done that, but okay, I guess it wasn't really a betrayal. It didn't, I can loosen up a little, another classic example, lies.
Mm-hmm.
They're the folks I meet who say, well, I never lie. They're lying. I mean, and I'm not trying to say we should be proud of bending the truth.
No, but everybody
But
lies.
everybody lies. If again, you don't have to have a super strict definition of lying. We'll all find our little ways of shaping bending the truth or shaping the truth, or to stay out of trouble.
Mm-hmm.
That's usually why we do it.
Right.
I don't want to say it that way because that sounds bad. Even though I'm kind of leaving out some important details. So again, I've met folks who feel like, well, bad enough that he ate the last Oreo, but then he lied about it.
Yes.
Okay. Yes. Well, and it's funny because they'll say, look, I'd be annoyed if you ate the last Oreo, but you're lying about it. And look, I don't want to. It's not funny. I say this in the context of Oreos. It's not black and white. But it isn't. You know what I mean? Because that phenomenon, again, that particular thing, it's just silly. But if it's a pattern where somebody routinely is afraid to tell their partner, or just refuses to tell their partner the truth, rather than just say, oh geez, I'm sorry, that was pretty selfish of me, wasn't it? I knew you wanted that, and sorry. That could be a problem. But one thing like that, oh God, I'm remembering now this couple I worked with 25 years ago at least, I think, where it was a mother and stepfather. I was working with them. I wasn't working with their kids. And they were talking about this one, 13-year-old kid that they had. And the stepfather happened to have a connection with the police, I guess. I don't know if he was a policeman or something. But he had access to a polygraph machine. And he was administering a polygraph to the 13-year-old to see whether the 13-year-old was lying about,
Oh my God.
where she went. And I'm thinking, oh my God.
Boy.
And
Great relationship.
Yeah,
right?
and so if that's the situation, you can kind of understand why somebody lies. All of that by way of saying, deciding if you really have to think of it as betrayal, is a useful thing to do often. That said, substantial majority of the folks that I deal with who come in talking about betrayal, there's no ambiguity about it. Yes, I cheated. Yes, she cheated. He cheated. And there are arguments about was something cheating or not, but more often it's like, no, we know he cheated. Now maybe the degree they'll disagree about or things like that. So those things are clear betrayals.
Mm-hmm.
So there's her title for today. You know, how can you heal?
Yeah, how can you heal
And move on. Well, it ain't easy. For starters, that's the thing about betrayal, and that's why people are looking at betrayal trauma. Typically, well, again, what would be your guess? And I'm thinking in your past life before I knew you had some experiences in that area, as did I. What sort of reactions do you remember?
Oh, anger for sure.
Yeah.
Rage, actually.
Yes. Yeah.
It goes beyond anger. Rage, revenge, wanting revenge. Or possibly wanting to cut the other person out of your life and having nothing to do with them. I mean, these are all reactions to different types of betrayal.
Yeah.
Right?
Now, knowing you as I do, it is interesting to me what you focused on there. Because as soon as you said rage and started talking about what you were talking about, I'm sitting there thinking, you're explaining why you are, and for the benefit of folks, who don't know you the way I do, you're explaining why you are one of the most resilient people I know. Because your reaction was rage, anger. What you didn't say, and you may have felt some of this, by the way, even though you didn't lead with it. But it's interesting to me you didn't lead with it. You didn't say, I doubted my own judgment. I said, oh my God, who am I? What have I done? How could I have been so stupid? You didn't say all those things.
But now that you bring that up.
Yeah, you remember it now.
Yes.
Do you remember it now?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. It's just, so again, maybe I'm over
But I
psychologizing.
processed it, so that's not what stands out.
That's exactly what I'm thinking. Yeah. Now I say, at the risk of over psychologizing, I'm actually thinking, what you said is evidence that you had processed it, because you're not beating yourself up about it anymore, which is good. That's why I was sitting there thinking, oh, good. That's, you're saying, yeah, you were pissed. Somebody did something really bad and you were pissed, and had all the reactions of somebody who's really pissed. And you didn't say those things, but when I reminded you, you remember it, don't you? Yeah.
Yes, I do.
Yeah. Well, can you just say more about that? Like, what do you remember?
Well, I remember thinking something like, how could I be so stupid? And what does that say about my judgment? And what other stupid judgments have I made in my life? If I could make a judgment on, something so important that I was so blind in.
Yeah.
And is it possible ever to trust again?
Yeah. Bingo. Yes. All of the above. Which is why that when I talk about how you recover, well, let's get into the general topic, which is the other part of the title of that course that I'm done, Betrayal and Forgiveness. When I talk about forgiveness, I am not, underline, not talking about necessarily restoring a relationship, certainly not talking about minimizing anything that somebody did to you. Not talking about saying, oh, it was really no big deal. Well, that's minimizing. I'm not talking about any sort of moral cleansing. I'm not saying, okay, now that I've forgiven you, you don't have to do anything about it. You don't have, there's no accountability. On the contrary, the way I'm using the word forgiveness, and this is not my invention, but yeah, I do talk about there's basically two ways people use the term forgiveness. And one is that way I was just saying. One means, that means you restore the relationship, you get past it, you just figure, all right, I can trust you again. Well, no, that's not the way I'm using it, because that way leaves you at the mercy of what somebody else does. How do you trust somebody if you don't know if you can trust them? And so you can't forgive them until you trust them. So you have to be in that state of rage and that state of constant being on guard. No, that's absurd. The way I use the term forgiveness is entirely an inside job. In other words, it has virtually nothing to do with the person who hurt you. It has to do with your being able to let go, to really process the trauma is what it's about. Let go of the rage.
Yeah.
Let go of the obsession. Let go of the self-doubt. To get past that and say, okay, wait a minute. I am a valid person. I didn't know what I didn't know. See, that's what I mean by forgiving yourself. I didn't know what I didn't know. I've been valid. I'm not stupid. I'm not crazy. I'm not evil. I just was doing the best I could, and I got hurt, because that happens sometimes, doesn't it? So forgiving yourself is always part one, because there's always that sense of, how could I let this happen to myself? Yeah. So you stop beating yourself up. And then the second step after that, what do you remember? You've read my books. What do you do after you forgive yourself?
You forgive the other person.
Yeah. Yeah. How do you do that?
It ain't easy.
Well, my claim is that if you've really forgiven yourself deeply, it actually isn't that much of a step to forgive the other person. I'll tell you what I mean by that. What is it to forgive yourself? I was just talking about that. To forgive yourself is to say, I was doing the best I could. It's like, damn, I wish I'd known better. If I'd known better, I would have been on guard. I would have acted differently. I wouldn't have married that person or whatever, But I didn't. I mean, okay, in good faith, I didn't.
Right.
Sorry, that's who I was. Were there moments where I was sort of kind of willfully clueless? Yeah, because that's what people do. I didn't want to know. Maybe I suspected, but I pushed it out of my mind. Yeah, because that's what people do. Because the ramifications of starting to believe that are pretty awful. Look what happened when you found out it was true. So not surprising. Moreover, were there moments where maybe I contributed to some of this? I haven't been the nicest person in the world, probably. We're all human, right? So if I can get there about myself, pretty short step to get there about the one who hurt me. It's like, damn, I guess they were doing the best they could too. Now, that's when people sometimes look at me funny, right? They say, what do you mean, that bastard doing the best he could? What are you talking about?
Right.
Well, in the sense that he was who he was. It's like, yeah, he was operating with whatever he knew and didn't know. He was operating with whatever resentful ideas he had about me, justified or not. That does in no way morally justifies it, but it sort of emotionally explains it. And people who've done research on people who cheat, inevitably what they find is there's a sort of progression of justifications that happen. Where somebody who's not a sociopath, right? We're talking about decent human beings, right? Who actually care about other people, can convince themselves it's okay. It's often based on resentment. Well, she's mad at me all the time anyway, so what difference does it make? Or I'll give her something to be mad at. Or it sounds like crap when you say it, but it fits the moment. When they're angry, they're hurt, they're resented. They can think of all the times that she's been hurtful to him, so he cheats. It doesn't make it right, but it makes it somewhat more understandable. So when you can get to the point of saying, well, okay, now that I have a clearer view, now that I'm not beating myself up, now that I'm not even beating him up, mentally, now I can think, well, all right, that's who he was. I don't have to be angry about it anymore. Now the question is, well, now what's the question?
How do you get past it?
Yeah, how do you get past it? And moreover, if you're talking about a marriage,
heal from it.
Yeah, well, if you're talking about a marriage, now you got to decide what do you want to do about the marriage. That's a whole different question from forgiveness. I say that in terms of forgiveness as I've defined it, you need to forgive at that level. You need to get to the point where at least you can think clearly, even about the other person, before you have any way of deciding, okay, what do I want to do about this relationship? Do I want to actually see if we can rebuild trust? Can I understand someone enough who hurt me, enough to say, damn, the more I understand about the context of this, the more I can see how someone, I know this to be a decent human being. And I keep saying he because I'm just assuming the cheater was he, so let's go with that. It isn't always, obviously.
No, it's not always.
Of course not. But I know enough about him that he's a decent human being, and he had his reasons, even though I don't agree with them. They weren't morally right, but I can kind of see how someone could get there. Maybe if we can get our relationship on a much better level of connection, maybe I can trust him again. And I know couples that have done that. That's the part that I find very inspiring, because to do that, it's really spiritual work as much as anything else. And I don't mean, just, forgive and move on and give it to God. I mean, I don't mean to be dismissive of that. I guess I am being dismissive of that. But it isn't just that.
No, it's not.
It's
it
much,
can't be just that.
It's much harder work than that, because it is actually a process of both parties recognizing not only where things went wrong, but facing the anxiety of realizing the ways they've probably failed each other.
Right.
And then being so grateful that they've learned that they can connect again. They can risk connection again. And I've known numbers over the years, many, many couples who've been able to do it. I also know many, many couples who haven't. And couples that I would say nevertheless healed, but decided to separate as part of their healing. Also perfectly valid from my perspective. There are people who will say, wow, okay, I see how this happened. I wish it hadn't. I certainly wish there hadn't been deception involved, but I do see how it happened, and we're going to need to separate because I can't live with that, and it doesn't make sense to live with that. And I'm being very elliptical here because I'm in part describing my own experience. But that phenomenon doesn't mean I have to be angry anymore. I can even have some understanding. I can have some empathy. I can say, I can see how someone in that situation could have done what they did. So when you can get there, you might decide to split up, but nevertheless, if you're co-parents, for example,
Right.
still work together cordially, to take care of your kids or whatever. So that's also a form of healing. What isn't healing is what often happens when I first see people, especially when I first see people and it's been a while since whatever, let's say it's cheating, a while since the cheating was revealed.
Yeah.
I'm often seeing them in the phase where the one who is cheated on is the probation officer and the one who did the cheating is permanently on probation. And that is not a viable, that doesn't work.
No,
Over
because
the long run.
that doesn't show that you trust.
Right, and neither party wants that. That usually the one being the probation officer is not happy about it,
Of course not.
and nor is the one obviously on probation happy about it, and it doesn't work. And it's interesting because and it's a very common scenario, especially early on, and interestingly, it often takes the person who did the cheating to be able to say, this is not viable, I can't keep doing this. And they're often, understandably, I think, very reluctant to do that because they feel so appropriately guilty. It's like, well, I don't get to say to her, let's say he's the cheater, I don't get to say to her, look, no, you can't keep looking at my phone, even though I'm assuring you there's nothing there. You haven't seen anything there that causes, that means I'm cheating again. I understand why you worry about it, but no, I'm not going to keep doing this. No, I'm done answering questions about exactly what I did on a specific date so that you can feel either angry or reassured about what I was telling you then. We both know that I did lie to you about it. I was denying it, and I was lying when I did that. I'm not going to go into more detail about that. Now, for the cheater to say that, certainly early on, is basically saying you might as well break up. So it's not that I advise people to do that, but ironically, it often takes the one in that position to say, look, I so understand why you are so angry, but this is not a basis for a relationship. So if you actually want to stay together, we're going to have to find some way of getting past that. And for the cheater to say that, ironically, he has to forgive himself enough to be viable.
Yeah.
He has to not be, his guilt is totally appropriate, but he has to not be dissolving in shame. He has to not be feeling like I have no right to have any feelings. Because he does have a right to have feelings.
Yeah.
And that's a tough one, because it's early on, especially for the one who was cheated on, they're often feeling like, I don't want to hear about his right to have feelings.
Right.
I want to hear about, what he's going to do to assure me that he's never going to hurt me like that way again, because I don't want to split up. In spite of everything, I do love him. What are we going to do here?
Right.
Totally understandable, but they're going to have to move past that. And so it is one of those ironies that eventually it often takes the one who did the cheating to recognize, look, I'm not sure I can trust you to not be angry at me all the time, to be able to forgive me in that sense. And it takes the one who was cheated on often to say, wow, I need to get past this myself. I need to make a choice myself, even though my anger, my resentment is totally understandable. Nobody would think it's crazy, but I'm going to have to make a decision that says, if I want to actually have a chance of being viable, I'm going to have to make a decision to say, I'm going to stop being angry, which sounds like
Well, it's hard to do.
Yes.
It's
well,
really
for good
hard
reason.
to do. Yeah.
And I point out in my course, I have a whole chapter on when you shouldn't forgive. If you still need the anger to get you out of an untenable situation, that's not the time to forgive. By forgiveness, I'm saying means you let go of the anger. If you still need it, you're not going to let go of it. Your body won't let you. That makes sense. But if you're, that's the thing. If you actually want to make it work, you're going to have to make a decision. Now, the interesting thing about that decision, for the person who was cheated on, I never suggest that they should decide they can trust the other person and they'll know for sure they'll never be hurt again.
Right.
That would be to say, oh, so I should become stupid?
Right.
Right. No, you should not become stupid. No, at all. But that's always been true.
Mm-hmm.
That's true of anybody. Do you know what I mean? It's like if you think nobody could ever hurt you, you're deluded. And that is often what happens with people when they get into a loving relationship. They delude themselves and think, oh, that you'll never hurt me. And then the first time somebody hurts them in some small way, they feel betrayed, you know.
Mm-hmm.
No, we all hurt each other because we're all human beings. That's part of the deal. We don't all cheat on each other, but we all hurt each other. But to the extent that you can trust that if it happened again, it wouldn't kill you. Do you know what I mean? It's like, okay, I can take the risk because it would suck if he cheats again. It would suck, and I'm very likely I would say no. Then we're done. I'm not going to keep trying to do this. But if I know that I'd be okay either way, it might be worth the risk because maybe he won't. Because maybe I can trust that he won't. Because we'll have both learned enough through this struggle that we can have a much better relationship than we ever had. Those are the folks who are grateful for the struggle. Those are the ones showing what I call faith.
Right. So you're saying it is possible.
It is possible for many people, yes, because I've seen it happen. Yeah, it is possible. So, that our question here, how can you heal and move on? It takes a lot of work. It takes processing the trauma, that's sort of the forgiveness piece. And then it takes figuring out how can you rebuild trust. And that isn't an inside job. That takes both parties. But what's fascinating about that is it's not just the one who was cheated on who has to figure out how they can trust the one who cheated. Of course they do. It's also the other way around. So each party has to feel like not only how can I trust you, but how can I be trustworthy? How can I know that this is possible? And at first you don't. So it takes, here comes the little thing that if people are doing the drinking game, they can take a shot when I say it, tolerating the anxiety.
Right.
Yes, tolerating the anxiety. Yeah, it takes tolerating anxiety. It is not work that offers any sort of quick, immediate relief. There is a little bit of relief that I do offer. And I say this in my little intro video, actually. The relief you might get, and I think many people have got when they just start the course, they get relief from just hearing that this can happen to normal people. You're not crazy, you're not evil, and you're not stupid. And moreover, there is a way out of this. You will feel better. And it won't take forever. It'll take longer than you wish, which is immediate, right?
Right.
But it won't take as long as you fear. And there is often relief just in hope and knowing you're in a process that's going to get you somewhere.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. So take the course and find out.
Let me switch into promotion mode now. Yes, take the course.
Take the course.
Take the course,
or
yeah.
find somebody to work with. Could be Bruce.
Could be me. Could be
somebody
someone else. Yeah.
But it's possible to heal from the trauma, but sometimes it takes an outside party to help you get there.
Yeah, it often does. Yeah. And moreover, if I may, again, in promotion mode here, you can take the course and do therapy at the same time. And it's really helpful. Or take the course first and then do therapy. And much as I hate to suggest that someone not work with me immediately, but if you take the course and then work with me, it'll be more efficient to work with me. It'll save you a little money because you probably won't need quite as many sessions because the course will set you on a path, I believe, toward much more effective therapy because you'll be working on the stuff that really matters to work on.
Yeah, and it also gives you ideas and suggestions that it's hard to think about on your own, especially when you're in that, betrayal mode.
Yes. Yeah. When you're in that
it's hard to think clearly.
It's hard to think clearly.
Yeah.
Yeah. The subtitle of my course actually is How to Navigate the Turmoil and Learn to Trust Again. Because there's turmoil. That's right. It is highly.
Yes, there is. Lots of turmoil.
Yeah. Yeah. So if I can leave folks just in terms of what we're talking about here with, why take my course or something like that, it will help you start to calm the turmoil.
Yeah.
It will do that for you because it'll give you a sense you're doing something that is actually useful.
Sure.
And it won't solve all your problems overnight, but it will get you moving in the right direction, which itself, okay, you're not just stuck. You're not, there things will feel better.
Yeah.
It gets better. Yeah.
Well, good to know.
Indeed.
Good to know.
So, gee, before we leave, we ought to mention your book, because speaking of
Oh yeah.
Speaking of making
here
a-
someplace.
making relationships spicier and happier,
Yeah, spicy happy relationships begin when you can read to your partner from The Blue Tent: Erotic Tales from the Bible by Laria Zilber.
Laria Zilber, whom I shouldn't tell you this for fear you'd think I would be wanting to cheat on you, but I've met her, and she's really sexy. What can I tell you?
What can I tell you?
Yeah, I have met her, and of course you did the voiceover for her book.
I did.
Yeah. Even though I've never seen you and her in the same room at the same time for some
That's
strange
true. We
reason.
just keep missing each other.
You do keep missing each other, and she looks so like you, except for the blue hair. She looks just like
She
you.
does look very similar.
Yeah, that's probably why I'm attracted to her. What
Could
can I
be.
say? Yeah.
Could be.
Yeah. So yes, do get a hold of Laria's book. It is available as we say, anywhere books are sold. You can get it on Amazon. Just search for The Blue Tent: Erotic Tales from the Bible. Otherwise, you'll be looking at nice pictures of blue tents, which is not. I mean, maybe you need that too.
Oh, maybe you're going camping. So when
Right.
you're going camping, get your blue tent and
And
bring the
then
book.
Bring the book, and then you can read
Nice.
a blue tent in the blue tent. Right.
Campfire reading.
Exactly. Right.
Sure beats ghost stories, don't it?
I certainly think so. But moving right along. So I guess we're all set, aren't we?
I guess we are.
And so until next time,
Remember, be kind
don't panic.
and have faith.